Hello again. In this video I'm going to give a brief overview of multi-sampling in Ableton Live using Sampler. So multi-sampling is basically the process of recording multiple samples of a sound or an instrument at multiple velocities and then combining these multiple samples across a key or velocity range in a MIDI track to then create a more realistic impression of the sound or the instrument. Just for example, a snare drum, which will be the example I'll use here today, is just the difference in tone and the intricacies of the sound between a light, medium and a hard snare hit can be quite different. So instead of just using one snare hit and turning our volume up or down, if we capture these multiple velocity samples, we can map these on a key and velocity range so that depending on how hard we hit our MIDI key or our note or whatever we're using, it'll become sort of velocity dependent, I guess, on what type of sound we're going to get. So just creating a more realistic impression of the instrument or whatever sound we're using. All right, so first thing to do will just be to go in and double click on Sampler, and it'll throw it in a MIDI channel for us. Okay. Drag this back a bit. See? All right. The first thing to do would be to probably just open up our zone so we can see where we're at. Now what I'm going to do is I've captured 3 different snare drum hits just for this example. So I'm going to go and grab those. Okay, so now I'm just going to drag in my captured snare hits. I'm just going to drag them in velocity order just to make our life a little easier as well. Light, medium, hard. Okay, so as you can see from this, we're on our key range, which means that all 3 of those snare hits are now being mapped across all the keys on our MIDI keyboard. As you can see, not ideal for a percussive instrument, so probably want to isolate that just to one note. So we can go up, and if we select all of our hits, we can just go up here, we can just not a fade, let's not fade it just yet. We can drag this in till we get to the note we want to map it to. So let's go to D2, and same again on this side, drag that in till we get to D2. So that now has isolated our snare hits to just one note on our MIDI keyboard. So D2, there it is. Okay, so as you can see, a bit different to our original sound, and that's because our root note of our instrument, which is the note at which our samples will be played back at their original pitch, is set to C3. Okay, so the way to change that is to go down to our sampler instrument, click and hold on root key, and we just drag down. We can just get to our desired note, which is D2, and if we put it there, now when we play it, we're back to our original sound. Okay, so the next thing to do is obviously we don't want all 3 of our sounds being triggered. So let's head over to our velocity range. Now what this does is this gives us the ability to map all 3 of our hits across our velocity ranges so that depending on how hard our keys are being struck, will determine which sample of our snare drum gets played. So I found the easiest way to do this is select all, right click, distribute ranges equally. Now that gives us an even spread of all 3 hits across our velocity range. So as you can see, I'm using my electric piano, so it's really hard to display those soft ones, but yeah, you can see it slipped down there. Much easier to do on a MIDI controller. But now you can see that we've spread all our snare hits across equally across the velocity range and created a sort of multi-layered snare sound. So that's pretty much the basics of multi-sampling. Now if you wanted to create a drum rack, you could go ahead and you sort of do this for, you know, kick drums and snare drums and hi-hats, toms, all that sort of stuff, and create a very multi-layered drum rack. Or musical instruments as well, or any type of sound. But that's just the basics there. So we might just leave it there, I think. All right.